Welcome back to Up Front. Some state lawmakers complained earlier this year that Governor Walker hadn't given them a good budget to start with and was absent as they worked on it. Others chafed and took to Twitter when Walker said he had to convince some fellow Republicans to go along with the public employee union changes known as Act 10. Now that the governor is back full-time at the Capitol, does he have some relationships to repair? We're asking Senate Republican Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald. Senator Fitzgerald, it's good to have you back on the program.
Good to be with you.
So does he have relationships to repair with state lawmakers?
You know, I think the budget process certainly is always kind of in the court of the legislature. And although we're always checking with the administration, I don't care who the governor is, as to whether or not they're going to be on board with something, that still remained intact. So I think it was a little over-exaggerated, certainly. And, you know, I talked to the governor. I mean, the presidential stuff he feels is behind him right now, and he's going to re-engage kind of not only with the legislature but statewide, and I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be able to work through it.
What has he told you about his plans? Publicly, it says that he intends to serve out his term. He has no interest in a cabinet position. What has he told you?
Yeah, roll up his sleeves, wants to come in and talk to our caucus, kind of discuss the issues that are in front of us, keep pushing the reforms. You know, we didn't waste much time. We've rolled out some reforms now already. So I think we're going to have a good fall session. I think the governor's going to be there and be engaged, and then we'll see what we have next year.
Let's talk about some of the policy priorities. You mentioned you've been talking with the governor. One that came out last week was talk about reforming the civil service system in Wisconsin.
Right.
Why is that a priority? Why did that need to be done?
Senator Roger Roth from Appleton came to me a while ago and said, hey, I'm working on something that's kind of been out there for a while, and he brought up the civil service stuff. And I said, you know, it's actually been a discussion that goes back to 2010 when Republicans took over control of the Capitol, that there needed to be some things done in and around civil service. And I think what we have, it's not a repeal of civil service, not even close. But it's some tweaks that I think not only come from the legislature, but if you talk to local levels of government, you'll find that a lot of them will say the same thing. It's really difficult to get rid of bad employees. They think the civil service test is outdated and not needed anymore. It's not the way that it works in the private sector. And there's some real kind of horror stories about some real abuses that all of us would agree should result in firing, and it's just not happening under the system we have right now.
Critics of this idea of reforming civil service say a couple of things. They say, number one, this is opening the door to political patronage, that you're going to see Republicans want to put some of their people in there. The civil service exams go by the wayside, gives them a chance to have a little more control over the process. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's what the original goal was 100 years ago, but I just don't see it. I mean, I don't see a huge shift. And although the criticism will probably remain there throughout this entire discussion, we're not rushing it. People will be able to make their points and make their case if they really think that that's going to happen. I don't see it, though, and I think to some extent many people that are even involved in the civil service system would have a hard time making that case that that's actually going to result in that type of change.
Back in 2011, when Act 10 was being discussed, the governor told public employees, don't worry about it, you'll still have civil service protections. Now you're talking about making changes to civil service protections. Have you or the governor gone back on your word, that pledge that you made back in 2011?
No, civil service will still be there. It'll still be a big part of the Wisconsin system. But certainly I think if you talk to leaders at, like I said, not only the state level but local level, and those that do the hiring and firing, they are very frustrated with what's going on right now in some of these very, very extreme cases. That's really what we're targeted at, and I think in the end, we'll be able to get the votes for those minor tweaks.
Let's talk for a moment about the Government Accountability Board. That is obviously a policy priority for Republicans.
Right.
Ultimately, you want to make changes to the GAB as it's now configured. What is it likely to look like?
I think, I've been saying since day one, I think we should go back to the model that worked for many years, and that means that there's probably going to be two divisions, one that focuses on ethics and the other that focuses on elections. I think both both Speaker Voss and I have met on numerous occasions, and then the authors of the bill as well have been meeting, and I think we're getting close to having some type of structure that I think not only will work, but will have bipartisan support. I'm really hoping that we can get Democrats to vote for this as well.
Did it work before, though? That's the question, because you came up with a GAB because the feeling was that it didn't work. Why do you want to go back to something that obviously prompted people to make changes?
No, I think, you know, it was thrown out because of a knee-jerk reaction to the so-called caucus scandals. And I think even some of us that voted in favor of that bill very quickly felt uncomfortable with the way it was developed and put in place. So I think that structure will work. I think if something happens that's really egregious, it rises to the level of, you know, hey, there's going to be a bipartisan support for making a change. So no, I like the new model, and I'm hopeful we can get the votes for it.
Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald, it's good to have you back on the program.
Good to be here.
Thanks for your time. Celebrity speculation about who will run for governor in 2018. Is the Milwaukee County Executive interested? I'll ask him next on Upfront.